Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking your Kubernetes cluster and treating it exactly like what it should be, a highly restricted, top-secret government facility. We're stepping right into the tense, high-stakes world of cyber defense to learn how to lock things down from the inside out. If you're looking to master how the pros actually use RBAC, network policies, and pod security standards to armor-plate their containerized workloads, well, you're in exactly the right place. Let's get into it.
So let's kick things off with a high-stakes scenario. We need to ask ourselves a really simple but honestly terrifying question. What can a cyber actor actually do once they slip past your outer walls? It's a super common misconception that securing the perimeter is enough. We've all been there. But in a highly distributed system like Kubernetes, an attacker who breaches just one single application container is now literally standing in the hallways of your facility. And this official guidance from the NSA and CISA hits the nail right on the head. It highlights exactly why that internal breach is so insanely dangerous. A tiny breach in a single pod, that can rapidly escalate. If an attacker manages to grab the default account tokens that are just lying around in a compromised app, they can pivot. They escalate their privileges and boom, they've achieved a full cluster takeover. Game over.
So to stop that from happening, here's our briefing itinerary to secure the facility. We're going to cover 1. The facility perimeter, 2. Identities and service accounts, 3. Defining clearance levels, 4. Issuing the badges, and finally, 5. Securing the vault.
All right, Phase 1, the facility perimeter. Let's establish the boundaries of our Kubernetes environment.
To do this, Kubernetes uses namespaces. Think of namespaces as entirely separate wings or departments inside our government facility. By logically partitioning our cluster, we can completely isolate different workloads, teams, and applications from one another. This is your foundational step. It basically ensures that if a fire starts in the accounting wing, it gets contained right there. It doesn't spread and burn down the entire building. Moving right along to Phase 2, identities and service accounts. It's time to identify exactly who or what is operating in the shadows of the cluster.
Now, it is absolutely crucial to understand the two very different types of identities in K8s. First, you have normal users. These are the human administrators, right? The people managing things from the outside. But then you have service accounts. These are the automated, non-human identities assigned to your pods. They're the ones operating in the background, handling API requests. And here's the hidden danger. Kubernetes automatically hands out these ID badges to every single automated process by default, literally everyone, unless you specifically step in and tell it not to.
Okay, Phase 3, defining clearance levels. Let's talk about structuring permissions with roles and cluster roles.
Your primary tool for this is a role. In Kubernetes, a role represents a specific set of permissions, and it's super important to note that these are purely additive. There are absolutely no deny rules here. If you don't have explicit permission, you are denied by default. So a role is essentially a localized badge color that grants access exclusively within a particular namespace. It dictates exactly what a subject can do, like say reading pods or modifying deployments, but only within that one specific department.
In stark contrast to that, we have the cluster role. This is a non-namespaced resource. You really need to think of a cluster role as a master key. Because it's cluster scoped, it can be used to grant access to global resources like worker nodes, or it can be used to grant permissions across every single namespace in the entire facility, all at once.
Just look at the stark contrast here between localized safety and massive global risk. A standard role restricts an operative to a single department, right? And in that department, things like pod security standards, your baseline or restricted profiles, and default deny-all network policies act as localized firewalls. If something gets compromised, the damage is completely trapped in that one room. But a cluster role? That is a master key. If an attacker gets their hands on administrative cluster privileges, they totally bypass all those local walls and own the entire facility. No way around it.
Which brings us to Phase 4, issuing the badges. Let's connect these identities to their clearance levels using bindings.
See, a role by itself doesn't actually do anything. It's really just a definition on a piece of paper. To actually activate it, you need a role binding. A role binding is the administrative act of physically pinning that specific colored badge onto a specific operative's uniform. It connects the subject, whether that's a user, a group, or a service account, to the role, officially granting them those exact permissions within a designated namespace.
This official matrix from the NSA and CISA is amazing at visualizing how this whole access control architecture comes together. Up on the top row, you've got your subjects.
Below that, you define the clearance via a role or a cluster role. And finally, the links, the bindings, snap the two together. But pay close attention to the crucial difference at the bottom. A role binding gives you safe, namespace-scoped access, while a cluster role binding hands over highly dangerous, cluster-scoped access.
Now, a critical rule of this system is that it is highly rigid by design. Once a binding is created, the role or cluster role it refers to is completely immutable. If an operative changes departments, you can't just casually swap out their badge on the fly. Nope. You have to completely delete the existing binding and recreate a brand new one from scratch. This rigidity is actually a feature, not a bug. It prevents accidental privilege escalation and forces us admins to be super deliberate about every single access control change.
Finally, we arrive at Phase 5, securing the vault. This is where we safeguard the crown jewels and all your sensitive data.
Your applications obviously need passwords, API keys, and tokens to actually function, but leaving these lying around in plain text inside your container images or pod specs, that's literally like writing the vault combination on a sticky note and slapping it on the door. A Kubernetes secret is a dedicated object designed to lock this data away safely. It separates your confidential data from your application code, drastically reducing the risk of accidentally exposing it during your routine operations.
And we can actually take this a step further by using the HashiCorp Vault sidecar pattern, which is heavily recommended by OWASP. Instead of your main application trying to handle complex security handshakes, you deploy a secure courier. So a pod launches with 2 containers, your main application and a sidecar container. This sidecar independently authenticates with the external vault, it retrieves the sensitive payload, and then writes it to a temporary, shared in-memory volume. Your main app just reads the secret locally. It's completely oblivious to the complex, highly secure delivery process happening right outside its doors.
All right, let's wrap this up with our facility lockdown protocols, enforcing official NSA and CISA hardening guidelines.
According to the official NSA and CISA hardening guidelines, these right here are your non-negotiable lockdown steps. First, you've got to stop Kubernetes from automatically handing out those ID badges by disabling auto-mounting ServiceAccount tokens. Seriously, just set it to false. Second, completely shut down anonymous requests to the API server. Third, absolutely enforce the principle of least privilege across the board. And finally, strictly limit any use of those dangerous ClusterRole bindings we talked about.
So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. Defining security on paper is great, but until you actually strictly enforce these RBAC and secret management principles in your live environments, your facility's front doors are essentially still wide open. So go on, check those default service accounts, map out your bindings, and make 100% sure your cluster is truly locked down. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep your cluster secure and